hearing, Z2019-1645 on Matthew Hogan, requesting the permission to work in an upland review area to remove 62 square feet of riprap, construct infiltration trench, grading and retaining a wall on the property located at 6 Center Parkway, Plainfield, map 17, lot 11, lot 1.
Good evening, Commission members. Thank you for having us. My name is Daniel. I'm with J&D Civil Engineers. I'm here on behalf of Matthew Hogan, who owns BH Trailers and Plows in the Industrial Park. Well, we kind of talked about this a fair amount at the last meeting. Is there anyone here for the public hearing for BH Trailers? All right, I'll try to keep it quick then. Matthew's business is doing well. He's trying to expand, so he purchased some additional properties, and he's trying to build inventory storage areas for his plows and trailers. So Matthew's trying to build some gravel storage areas on this other lot downhill. Most of that work is outside the wetlands and wetland buffer. So really the reason that we're here this evening concerns his existing developed lot. Matthew extended his parking area to the northeast. And originally the plan was to have that be gravel to be impervious, to infiltrate rainwater. The contractor went ahead and used reground asphalt, reclaimed asphalt, so it's more or less paved and it is impervious. It was making some erosion problems, draining down into these pockets of wetlands here. Ryan noticed the issue. The contractor tried to correct it by building a plunge pool or infiltration basin just downhill of the parking lot above the wetlands to try and slow that water down. Unfortunately, he didn't quite scale off the plan correctly and went a little bit too far. So he went about 5 feet into the wetlands with these hand-placed riprap stones. And so really our proposal is we have a remediation plan, which is to, again, to pull that riprap out without using any heavy equipment and restore the wetlands to its original state. Here's kind of the remediation plan that has a bunch of notes about how the work will be done. It's about 62 square feet of disturbance. Additionally, we will be building a little bit of a trench on the downhill side, an infiltration trench to further help attenuate that rainwater. So, anyone has any questions?
Point out exactly where the disturbance is on this?
Yes, of course. It's this, again, the wetlands are shown in blue, and then the riprap is that little hatched area, so it's just this little piece here.
And the wetlands that are in blue, those are all still intact?
Yes, yeah, yep. Some of these, I think, were kind of disturbed by the previous owner, Connecticut Mop. Again, our original plan was to have the forest extend past the wetlands. It's kind of a lawn area, but again, that was existing when Matthew purchased the property. So really, but the rest of this, yeah, it hasn't been touched. No trees were taken.
Okay, does anybody have anything to say from the audience? Do we have any other questions? Okay, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing is closed. We'll go on to our roll call. To my left, Ralph Wells, Tom Sinkolins, Joe Campbell, Ron Discharges, Chairman, Randy Stillwell, Ryan Ray, and Billy Minow, our recording secretary. First item is review and act on the minutes of the meeting dated November 20th, 2019.
Motion the meeting minutes be approved.
Take a second.
I second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other discussion? If not, all will say aye.
Aye.
Okay, unfinished old business of Matthew Hogan requesting permission to work in the upland review area to remove 62 square feet of riprap, constructing infiltration trench, grading and retaining wall on property located at 67 Parkway, Plainfield, map 17, block 11, lot 124. Any other discussion? Questions?
Lower portion of the site, that's not part of this application.
The retaining wall is going to be built at the downhill edge of his other parking area. There we go. There's a retaining wall here at the downhill edge of that lower parking area. It's a little bit of a steep slope, so we're kind of terracing it almost. But again, the wetlands are shown in blue, and then here's the wetland buffer in dash blue. So none of this work is I believe, within any buffers.
Ryan's company has already staked off where the wall's gonna go, so exactly what's gonna be. By Ryan's request.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That was already permitted. The only reason why we're here tonight is because of the encroachment into the wetlands up on the top portion.
It's 62 square feet.
Correct. My only suggestion is to pull the riprap back about 5 foot away from the wetlands. That way, water that spills out has about 5 feet to a little land flow to filter out any sand that might be in it before it hits the wetlands. Also in the springtime, I'll make a follow-up inspection, and it would be good if I see that further remediation is needed, wetlands plantings or something that I could require that.
When you do that inspection, you look for erosion.
Basically, in this case, I'll be looking for any sort of disturbance that occurred. I won't be able to tell if there's any damage until spring. I don't think there is, but just in case.
Okay, does anybody have any other discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve Z 2019-1645 with the consideration of possible additional remediation as required by staff, including but not limited to regrading by hand, wetlands, plantings, and keeping in mind requiring the constructed basin to be scaled back, so that's at least 5 feet compared to the wetlands.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
Okay, unfinished old business. Z 2019-1663 of Sammy P. Incorporated, requesting permission to work in an upland review area for earth rocks, excavation and processing on property located on Millbrook, Plainfield, map 10, block 17, lot 5.
Use copies, if anyone would like one from them.
I wrote some long streets also. For the record, John Felicia, Boundaries LLC, representing Sammy P. Inc. Sam is also present this evening as the applicant in the event that there are direct questions that you may wish to ask of him. The plans that Ryan is distributing are the same plans that I have here and the same plans that I have on our board. The plan set that you have in front of you is comprised of 11 sheets. It begins with a cover and a locus map, and an existing condition survey, and then it goes on to sheet 3, which is an 80 scale grading plan. Goes on to sheet 3, which is an 80 scale grading plan, which I'm going to use primarily for the presentation this evening because it gives you the best overall view of the project. The subsequent sheets are 40 scale sheets that identify more specifics in terms of the site grading for each phase of the project, as well as some of the smaller areas that were not necessarily as clearly visible at 80 scale. Then those sheets are followed by some groundwater monitoring profiles, as well as our notes and details, construction narrative, erosion control notes, which are found on page 10. The project is located on the north side of Millbrook Road, westerly of the existing railroad that separates this tract of land from the renewable energy plant, which is located on the east side of the railroad tracks. The property is comprised of approximately 53 acres. Our proposal is to excavate approximately 18 acres of that property under this application. I'm going to interject very briefly here. If you flip to the last sheet in the set, page 11. You'll see the remain or the entirety of the parcel on sheet 11. A couple more sheets. There we go. In developing the initial proposal for this, we were looking at this portion of the site, which is the easterly portion of the site that I mentioned against railroad tracks. We will be following up with a subsequent application in the next month or two for property located on the opposite side of this wetlands. In developing the plans for this, we took a further look at the rest of the property, and there is additional viable earth product resources on that side. Those will be a separate application, but just so you're aware that there will be others coming to follow, or another coming to follow. As I mentioned, we're excavating a proposal of 18 acres on this site. The access to the property is directly along the tracks. Just on the west side of the tracks, there's an existing paved driveway that extends from Millbrook Road in approximately 700 feet. At the terminus of that driveway, there's an area that has been previously excavated in years past. That area is probably about an acre. Although it's disturbed, it's stable. There's no runoff associated with that. The soils are highly permeable, and there's no runoff that's been associated with that. Our proposal is to extend from that terminus point, the existing excavation, to the north and extend along the length of the property that we're proposing to excavate with phase 1, which will consist of approximately 5 acres. Each of the proposed phases that we have identified are 5 acres or less. And we have elected to maintain a 50-foot separation distance from the limits of our proposed excavation to the wetland or the regulated wetland, which is located essentially to the southwest of the site, of the excavation site. There are more wetlands located to the northwest, and then additionally to the north in this area identified by flag number. Our entire excavation area maintains a minimum of 50-foot separation to all the wetland areas. It also maintains a 50-foot separation to the property lines. It will be excavated in a manner that begins in the south portion of the site and extends northerly and then northeasterly throughout the site to complete the excavation process. In looking at this sheet, you'll note that the grades that have been proposed start at 160 in this area, extend up to 162. There's a ridge through here, and then you'll see another 162 contour before it folds back to the north to the edge of our excavation area. What we've done, and I'll identify it better in the profile sheets, is what we've done is we have created an excavation floor that will essentially be surrounded by a berm all the way around our excavation. So between our excavation and the wetland area, beginning on the southeast portion of the excavation, that berm is about 10 feet high. And that extends all the way along that westerly border. There's an area that berm is actually 20 feet high along the northwesterly border, and then again approximately 10 feet high extending to the east. The lowest portion of the berm is identified between the two temporary sediment traps that are identified on the sheet in phase 3. That berm at this point is approximately 4 feet in height and basically ties into existing grade. So all of the excavation area is contained within a berm. There is no runoff from the excavation to any regulated wetlands or regulated areas. We're containing it entirely within the site itself. For each phase of the excavation, we've proposed a temporary sediment trap sized to meet the DEP requirements for stormwater quality. There's a temporary sediment trap shown here in phase 1 along the southwesterly portion of phase 2. There are 2 along the northerly portion of phase 3, and then finally a 4th sediment trap that will be installed in the southerly portion of phase 4. Upon completion of the excavation, the sediment traps located at the very north of the site and the very south of the site will be maintained as permanent stormwater quality basins, and those have been designed to maintain the water quality for the 100-year storm so that we're not increasing peak runoff from any events. I mentioned briefly the grading on the site. There's an existing ridge essentially that runs east to west through this portion of the property at elevation of approximately 190. In order to maintain the existing hydrology, we've graded the site at 0.5% to the south from that ridge, and we've also graded that at 2% to the north from that ridge so that we maintain the existing hydrology in site in terms of groundwater recharge. We have also conducted a series of test pits and installed monitoring wells on the site. Test pit and monitoring well number 1 is at the corner of the sediment trap located in phase 1. Number 4 is kind of in the middle of the site. Number 3 is in the northwesterly portion of the site. And number 2 is in the central northerly part of the site. The purpose of those test holes were to establish a groundwater table and be able to monitor that table during the design phase so that we could determine where groundwater levels would be so that we would maintain an adequate separation distance between the floor of our excavation and groundwater. What we have found in that process is monitoring well number 1 is the only well that we've encountered any groundwater in. We've encountered that at elevation 145. The existing and proposed grade in that area is elevation 160, so we're 15 feet above the water table. That's consistent in terms of our floor of excavation. We're at 160, 162, 162, and then again tailing into that berm that I had mentioned. The groundwater elevation that we encountered at elevation 145 is consistent with the elevations of the wetlands located both on the north, and on the south in the westerly portions of the site. The existing grade adjacent to those wetland areas is approximately 145 to 147. We're encountering groundwater at elevation 145, so we are confident that the groundwater elevation from the north end of the site through the site to the wetland on the south side are consistent at about 145, well below the floor of our excavation. It was not our intent to create a hole here. It's our intent to create a usable piece of property when we're done, so that once the excavation is complete, the property is usable for industrial development. It is in the I-1 zone in the town. The property is located outside of the aquifer protection zone, or the outside of the aquifer protection area, and is primarily comprised of Hinkley soils. The site itself, as I mentioned, will be accessed from the existing paved drive, approximately 700 feet long. We proposed an anti-tracking pad at the end of that paved drive. We've also proposed a concrete fueling pad adjacent to the driveway, as well as an area for materials processing in 2 areas identified for stockpile of reclamation soils. What I mean by that is we have an area identified to stockpile topsoil. We also have an area identified to stockpile subsoil. Our grading reclamation plan calls for a minimum of 4 inches of subsoil, followed by a minimum of 4 inches of topsoil once excavation operations are complete. So just to recap very briefly, I know we kind of spit a lot out quick. We have maintained 50 feet from all of the wetlands on the property, and we have maintained or by design incorporated a berm all the way around our excavation, which will contain any stormwater or any runoff so that there won't be any runoff to the wetland areas. In terms of the clearing itself, we will be operating from inside out toward the wetlands, so there is no reason to clear the slopes from the top of our proposed berm to the wetland limit. Those will maintain their vegetation in their natural state, and there's no reason to clear those. So we're not going to be clearing any downward slopes to the wetland areas. I had mentioned the profiles. Sheets 8 through 11 include profiles of the site. These are exaggerated section views, so the elevations look a little bit funky. That's why they're exaggerated views. You'll see the existing grade represented by the kind of irregular dash line at the top. Kind of looks like somebody's stock market graph. And then the proposed elevation by the consistent line at the lower portion of that. And then you'll see those lines that rise up on either end. Those represent the berm that will be in place that would separate the excavation area from the wetlands. We've also identified the test pits on the profile, which show the depth of the test pit that we've been able to look for and monitor groundwater. And you'll see at the bottom of the page, test pit 1, that the groundwater elevation is here down at about 145, well below our pit floor elevation of 160. The subsequent 2 sheets are similar in nature, what they depict in the berm that's been identified adjacent to the wetland areas. Sheet 10 includes the project narrative, the construction sequence, and erosion control notes and operation and maintenance thereof. It is specified in the notes that in terms of erosion controls and inspections, that the sediment fence barriers and inspections be done at a minimum of weekly, and also within 24 hours of any storm event which creates a discharge from the temporary sediment traps. So the erosion controls will be inspected at a minimum of weekly. It also goes on to identify that once the site is stabilized, those inspections occur on a monthly basis for a minimum of 3 months to ensure that the site has been stabilized and that the erosion control measures have been effective. Based on the size and scope of this project, we will also be submitting subsequent to local approvals of registration with the Connecticut Department of Environmental and Energy Protection for a general permit associated with industrial activities. Anytime you're excavating a site of this size, processing earth products, that registration is a requirement, and that registration is done subsequent to the local approvals. That registration also includes a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which will be part of that submission to DEEP. That'll be reviewed at that level. I know I just dumped a lot at you quick. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I do know that the project was submitted to your town's consulting engineer for peer review. Based on brief conversation with Ryan, I don't believe they have any significant comment, and those whatever comments they had would be addressed at the planning commission level as well. But I don't believe that there are any comments that would directly affect the regulated activities that we're proposing. I also have some brief comments from town staff, from your planner, again, that are planning related, that are not necessarily related to the regulated activities we're proposing. Do you have any questions?
The discharges from this temporary sediment basins, where do they go?
The discharges, if there were to be a discharge, and we don't anticipate that's likely, We've also submitted a stormwater report that you have in your files that was also submitted to your consulting engineer for review. If there were to be a discharge from those temporary sediment traps, the discharge from the trap in phase 1 is over a riprap pad that's located on the south end of that. It would discharge to the south, flow overland in a southerly direction, and eventually towards the wetland areas that are down in the south part of the site. But that overland flow area is going to be in excess of 100 feet before it would reach the wetland area. The discharge or feasible discharge, if it were to occur from the trap in phase 2, again discharges to the south. That would only be, it would be maintained at the toe of the berm. As I had mentioned, there's a 10-foot berm between our floor and the wetland here, or a 10-foot berm, and then it goes down to the wetlands. So that discharge would be contained at the toe of the berm, and it would just simply go into the ground. The traps on phase 3, the trap on the westerly portion of phase 3, again, well, that one discharges directly to the north. It discharges outside the regulated area to the north, and it actually discharges to a depression. There's a, if you look, if you can see close to that, if you can see it on a small scale or not, but the discharge is here. There's actually a bit of a natural depression here that's approximately 4 feet deep. That discharge, if it were to occur, would flow overland in this direction to this depressed area, and it would have to overtop that depressed area before it actually were to flow out to any of the adjacent wetland areas. The discharge for the second trap on phase 3 is, again, it's to the north, to the northeast, towards the property line, and again, it would just discharge at grade. There are no inland wetlands along that area that would be impacted. And then finally, the final sediment trap on phase 4, again, discharges to the south on the west side of the asphalt driveway, and it discharges at grade, so that water would be discharged at grade and essentially soaked up into the Hinkley soils that are fully beneath it. So they've been sized to meet the deep requirements, and we don't anticipate any discharges from them.
Anybody have any other discussion or questions?
Yeah, here you say you're gonna be 15 feet above groundwater?
Yes.
The bottom of your
Yes.
excavation?
Yes. Our excavation floor is at 160, groundwater is at 145.
You know how, you're right on the edge of Mill Brook, do you know what the elevation is in comparison to Mill Brook?
I don't know what the elevation of the brook is. I do know that the elevation of the wetlands adjacent to our work is about 146, 147. So it's down near that water table level.
You're well above that.
Yeah, we're 15 feet above that with the floor. And again, we have a 4 at a minimum, 20 at the maximum foot berm that would contain our site within the site before really ever being discharged.
Mill Brook actually comes out of the Cedar Swamp, and it's all about the same elevation.
Yeah. You be doing any washing there?
No, there's no washing proposed at this time. We would be processing, so we would be screening, crushing, and removing the aggregate products.
Have any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Z 2019-1663.
Motion seconded.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming up on the project.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Next item, Z 2019. Z 2019-1668 of RC Canoia Construction LLC, requesting permission to work in an upland review in inland wetland area. The two lots are subdivision located on Spalding Road, Plainfield, map 26, block 11, lot 2B.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Greg Claude from Killingly Engineering Associates, with a place of business at 114 Westcott Road, Jamestown, Connecticut. And I'm representing RC Canoia Construction on the application before you tonight. Did you have any plans with you? I have one set here. I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of history on the property. I've been before the commission on this very application back in 2006, or on this very property back in 2006 and again in 2018. This was the former Zara property on Spalding Road. And if you recall, back in 2006, they had free split a lot off in the middle of all their land that they owned with the hopes of building a house for their son. Those plans sort of fell through. At that time, there were some watercourse relocations or alterations that we permitted back in 2006. Those permits lapsed in time, and then in 2018, the Zaras came back to me, and in April of last year, we re-permitted that in front of this commission for the relocation of the watercourses. There's one up front here, there's another piece here, and there's another one that's actually on the other property. Since then, the Zaras have sold the property to Roger Canoia, which is RC Canoia Construction. He has constructed one home here. The home that is on lot 1 is already constructed. What we're looking to do now is divide the property into two. It's 5.2 acres total. We would have one lot that's 2.9 acres. The second lot would be 2.1. In speaking with Ryan, I did submit a letter asking for the original permit to relocate those drainage swales, to transfer that into Roger's name, because that was just done last April. So I believe he has that information here for you tonight. So because there's already a permit active on that part to develop this lot, those items would still need to be done. And I apologize that it doesn't show. There is one up front here. It shows there's this kind of comma-shaped one up front that goes around the old foundation. And then there's this one in the back here. And again, these are water courses. That means that it's kind of a wetland, a runoff of water above an upland soil. And we gave you all the information back in April last year on that. And they are associated with the drainage that's coming from across the street, under the road, kind of concentrated through that one area of the pipe. So with that, if you are agreeable in transferring that permit, that would apply. He would still relocate those two wetland areas, and that was we would relocate, create a new drainage swale down here with a level spreader all the way at the back of the property, well upland from the well above the wetlands, the main wetlands that are at the bottom of the slope. The development of lot number 2, we have our upland review area here for the lot. There is no development directly in it. The house is outside of it. The primary septic area is outside of that. The footing drain is outside of it. The only activity would be what was already permitted, which is that new swale that would be put in, that would be taking place, redirect this water. So as far as the subdivision, again, there is an old foundation here that might be removed. It's a stone and concrete foundation, kind of straddling the two property lines. It's still the plan that would be removed from the property. It's kind of in disrepair and mostly just rubble. There's also a foundation up front here that would be removed as part of this application when he develops lot number 2. I do also have for submission is a letter dated November 18 from the Northeast District Department of Health. We did do testing for the septic area, and they concur with the feasibility to develop this lot number 2, that it would meet the technical standards for septic systems. So if you don't have that for your records already, I will submit that copy The other thing that shows up on the property, if you're looking at it close enough, is he is acquiring a 40-foot, almost a 40-foot strip of land from the neighbor, which is now Nicholas Anderson, which was formerly Zara. That's so that he can meet, it's more of a planning thing when we get to the subdivision regulations, so we can meet the requirement of having the, I believe it's the 80,000 square feet of, or 60,000 square feet of exclusive of wetlands. And I wanted to submit, I did submit a newer plan tonight that's dated today. It shows that he did purchase that piece. And I have the deed for that, so that it's already kind of done. I know that's more of a planning thing, but it did happen last month, and when we started the application, it was kind of in the planning stages. So he does own that now, and my plans are updated to show that he owns that piece. And really, that's kind of our application. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
You flagged the wetland?
They were done by Joseph Thoreau.
No?
Yep, Joe did those. He did them originally in 2006, but he went back out in 2018 when we came before you and reflagged them. They were of similar nature, but these are the 2018 series that you see here.
It looks like
He gave you a full report in 2018. I have that report here. It's a record from before, which was in regards to the water courses. I was reviewing that report today. He really, his feel was that it wasn't going to make any significant impacts to the wetlands themselves. And that was the key thing.
this little area that's up here now.
Yeah, and that's,
Did he give that any kind of high values or anything?
no, everything was low value grade. And it is basically, what was happening there is, as it would flush through, it was getting blocked up with leaves because it is kind of flat up in the top area. The leaves were blocking the water is basically what was happening. And yeah, I think he's got, I'm not sure if that's just the delineation or is that the actual report that he did. Because the report was longer.
So here somewhere. Yes, there's the actual report. And again, the report that we're looking at, the relocation of the town drainage has already been permitted. So we're just seeing it again tonight, but it's already permitted, so that's not really part of this application. So you're not permitting that again, it's already been done in 2018.
He gave it for his functioning, its assessments, basically for groundwater recharge, that it was, yes, that it had a suitability for that. Habitat was no. Nutrient retainment was yes. Educational scientific value, no. Recreational value, no. Unique heritage, no. Supporting archaeological stuff. Visual quality, no. And endangered species habitat was no on his report that he had. And again, that was from the earlier approval for bizarre applications.
You just said it's a pretty crappy wetland.
And it isn't a wetland, again, it is just water courses that we're impacting, and they are basically just transporting that drainage down to the larger wetlands. We won't be impeding that, we'll just be relocating it over here in another function so that the property can be usable. And honestly, quite honestly, these two lots, it was a lot of invasive species up front here. It was a lot of bullbriar, and it took a lot of work to get that lot, looking pretty nice and pulling down everything and leaving some of the ash trees that were nice. But most of it was kind of scrubby.
Anybody have any other discussion?
Are they gonna use, when they develop this, put some temporary sediment control in there, so hay bales and stuff?
Yeah, we have silt fence. We have silt fence done there, and then there'll be some silt fence done there. The relocation too was all dictated that would be done during the dry season. So, and I've had that conversation with the contractor as well. We show silt fence, and the trench itself will be provided. We'll have riprap along the steeper portions of it. The upper portion where it's not as steep will be grass lined as originally designed.
Further discussion? Let's take a motion.
Motion Z 2019-1668 be approved.
I second that.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
There are 4 items we have to add to the agenda on the new business. Receipt 2019-1684 of Joseph Griffin to construct a gravel areas for storage of materials such as equipment attachments at Norwich 120, Norwich Road, old TV, oh, the old DVD place. That's one. Second one is C 2019-1686 of Passay Development LLC, requesting permission to work to construct three single-family homes with 1 wetlands crossing. The next one is Z 2019-1687 of Garrett Homes LLC, requesting to construct a 9,100 square foot retail with 46 parking spaces, 600 square feet of upland disturbance. And transfer of the permit from Zara to RC Canoia Construction LLC, Spalding Road.
Make a motion those 4 items be added to the agenda.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, so items A, B, and C, obviously you cannot act on tonight. You can act on them next month, providing everything is squared away. The transfer of the permit from Zara to Canoyer, that can be acted on tonight, and I recommend you do so. Simply needs a motion to transfer from Zara to Canoyer, and vote. If anyone's interested, I do have a request letter here.
Make a motion to table Z 2019-1684 Joseph Griffin.
Motion been made. Is there a second?
I second that.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Item B, you got some more discussion on that and potential for discussion for significant impact. I take it.
That would be the wetlands crossing.
Yes.
Yes. Passay Development, they have a driveway. There's going to be a 42-foot length of 18-inch HDPE pipe with flared ends and riprap. Total disturbance will be 620 square feet within the wetlands. They picked the narrowest portion of the wetlands. It ranges from 3 to 7 feet in width, where the intermittent water course goes across.
Any other discussion?
Upland disturbance being scheduled for public hearing. Make the motion to schedule Z 2019-1686 for public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Public hearing at the January meeting.
The motion Z 2019-1687, Garrett Homes LLC, be tabled until next month.
Second that?
Motion made and seconded. Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed?
Make a motion Z 2018-1305, request to transfer permit, be approved.
Have a second?
Seconded.
Motion been made and seconded. Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything else on the, to do tonight? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, I'd like the opportunity to be extended for any citizen participation, in case there is any.
Okay, any citizens' participation?
Some correspondence,
Okay,
any complaints?
No complaints.
not this one. Okay, all in favor of adjourning?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.